Alright, what's poppin', people? We're back. Yeah, we're really getting back in the grind of this. I got my motivation back, and I'm tearing up the scene yet again. What about it? And today, I felt we really needed to go back to our roots of NU this spotlight. Talk to you about the boy who's honestly, ever since dropping to NU, been one of the best Pokemon in the tier. And yeah, the video title, it's kind of fire, I know. Shout out to Evan Mobley, having a real good rookie year. I hope to see that man continue flourishing. But talking about Escavalier in NU, and this is a Pokemon that I feel no one would ever really associate with being NU. And maybe it's because it's a Steel type. And really the only Steel type anyone probably associates too heavily with NU is Steelix. And that boy hasn't even touched a tier this gen, which I'm still mad about. But you know, when you think about Escavalier's tenure at NU so far, it's been filled with peaks. There was a period of time this gen where Escavalier was definitely teetering. It was like on the precipice of looking like it should probably fall to PU. We're thinking probably back to when Copperajah was S rank still. So it's probably been like, what? I'm trying to think about my NU timeline with regards to shifts. Probably during the spring of last year, where Raja was by far the best Pokemon in the tier. Bronzong was still considered a really good Steel type. This was before the Iron Defense Body Press set was taking off. And Escavalier was just kind of struggling to find a spot. The other two Steel types were just so much better. You know, that was back when Raja was also a really good Stealth Rock setter, since Xatu hadn't picked up too much. And Escavalier just really struggled to find too many teams where it was like, yeah, you wanted a Escavalier here. Much of the time, Escavalier's usage was pretty much just, you know, tied to, okay, is Cresselia in the tier right now? Okay, is Hail in the tier right now? Those were really the only two big periods of time in NU last year, where Escavalier, or at least early on last year, where Escavalier had a more noted place. Because, especially versus Cresselia, you won that. Unless there were, like, Trick, Scarf, CM, which, you know, that wasn't the common set. You know, you were beating Cress. And then you were really good into Hail, just because, you know, Ice Resist. But once Copperajah started falling off, Escavalier was able to find a much better spot in the tier. It was just a lot more defined is like an option you could go to, because Raja wasn't, you know, basically this. There wasn't an inherent tax you were paying to not using Copperajah, and of course to a lesser extent Bronzong. And as some other Pokemon just left the tier, the power level of course coming down a little bit more, I think always just kind of helps certain Pokemon that are struggling to find their footing. It's really hard to say beyond Copperajah's fall off what really has contributed to Escavalier becoming so good. Because when you look at the other Steel types, right, that we've had, defensively, it's not like they do anything much worse than Escavalier. And if anything, I'd say they do most things a fair bit better. You know, the 4x weakness to fire is always going to be a problem for Escavalier when looking at Pokemon that it wants to check. Goodra, if we're talking about this current metagame, being at the forefront of those Pokemon. Although Copperajah is not exactly a great check to it, because Fire Blast still 2-hit KOs, you're at least not ever threatened with an Oko from the standard Goodra. And so, Escavalier struggles there. Of course, offensive variants of Sylveon with Mystical Fire, you're kind of getting messed up there as well. And then just various other Pokemon as well do have ways to give you some trouble, like Diancie if it goes Mystical Fire. Exploud is another special breaker that can just decide, okay, I don't want to deal with you switching in anymore, so I'm just going to pick you off now. Indeedee Female, if you want to look at a Pokemon that's been picking up in usage now. There are quite a few Pokemon that do make Escavalier's life a little bit more annoying. But Escavalier is also really good at checking several Pokemon. Maybe the others struggle with a little bit more. So like Tauros being one of those. You've got, oh, what's it called? Why did this Pokemon just, I literally saw it as well, yeah, Dragalge. Some of these just other Pokemon that are super prevalent at the top of the metagame that the other Steel types actually do get folded by a coverage move of. You know, you got Copperajah getting smacked up by Focus Blast, and of course when Bronzong goes to the tier, Dragalge could go Shadow Ball pretty easily. You've also got, when we talk about Tauros, close combat folding them. And then we can even talk about the benefits of Escavalier's secondary typing. Being neutral to ground, it's not like it's the most important thing, because most of the ground types are still smashing your, head in anyway. You talk about like Sylvally ground if it gets a sword stance up. Escavalier, you don't do anything to that. Even if you live a hit, you're not OHKOing back. But it does make Escavalier, or it gives Escavalier more turns to stay in, right? So when you think about Mudsdale switching into Copperajah, you can read that and Power Whip, and you're gonna get like 50% plus off, but you're still forced out the next turn. Escavalier isn't really dealing with that, so you get to stay in, you get to Toxic, and of course we're talking right now in the metagame, having Toxic plus Knockoff, that's just guaranteed progress tools. Copperajah isn't a lot of those options. And we could even still mention this, right? Good Pokemon are always going to be lured by someone. Something I remember Mary saying in the Innu Discord, or in one of the Innu-related Discords, somewhat recently, when someone was talking down on Escavalier and I think Diancie as well, saying like, oh, well, Goodra could just hit them both with a 4 times effective move. And it's like, okay, yeah. That doesn't make them inherently a lot worse, though. I think the main thing people always forget, especially with dealing with just some of these really strong wall breakers, is a Pokemon can still be really good just because it gives room around the Pokemon. So for instance, Goodra, I mean, you prevent it from Dracoing. Now, you could argue Goodra should be using its coverage moves primarily, but still giving you room around Draco, which is the strongest move it can just throw off against a neutral target, is still really good. And then of course Pokemon like Entity Female, Explode, some of those Pokemon with just that nuke of a stab attack, it's really good to not allow them to spam that for free. If you have a Pokemon on your team that just makes Explode and Entity, you have to question whether it's worth throwing off their Boom Burst / Expanding Force, respectively. That could be really helpful for giving you just more breathing room when trying to figure out how to switch into them. Now, there's a good chance to still just throw it off and hit your Escavalier, but you deny them from making as much progress as they otherwise could, which I think has a lot of inherent value to it. Now, when we talk about sets, I don't necessarily have these ordered in terms of like how good they are. Mostly with these two. More just the order that I like feel like I see when I'm playing against them. So obviously I'm gonna have Protect plus Toxic Escavalier first, because I feel every time I ladder and I run into an Escavalier, it's always this set. And it's so annoying. But this is why I think a big part of Escavalier, or this is why I think Escavalier has been able to find its footing in the metagame for so long now. At least if we're talking like DLC 2 stuff. DLC 1 Escavalier ran Choice Band 99% of the time. It felt like it just pushed everything shit in. It was really funny. But Toxic Protect Escavalier, as we mentioned, it's just really good at getting you progress no matter what happens. Very few Pokemon can actually come in on this combination. You're thinking about like what, Vileplume? And then everything else is basically paying a tax of some kind, whether they're getting Toxic as they come in, maybe they're getting knocked off if they're like a Talonflame or even an Arcanine. And so Escavalier is able to constantly leverage its really good overall bulk. I mean, look at these stats, they're just really nice. You're able to leverage that bulk, come in on a lot of just random attacks, and to just start slowly chipping away at the opposing team, just neutralizing certain threats, or at least making them a lot less effective. That, of course, gives you a lot of an advantage for the long term of a game. Think about knocking a Talonflame's boots off, and then, okay, well, that helps out your Salazzle or something late game. Obviously, this is going to be your best option if you really want that dedicated answer to certain special attackers that Escavalier is able to check, i.e. Dragalge, Goodra, Entity Female, what have you. It gives you the most bulk, so you're going to take those heavy hits most consistently. We know that you'll still get folded by fire coverage, but that's just kind of something you have to accept. Unfortunately, the Escavalier does have really good synergy with other Pokemon like Vaporeon and Sylveon, which I'll talk about a little bit more once I get to this set here. That just helps out in giving you even more room around those threats. You know, you're able to keep Escavalier's health high, let it keep switching into those nuke buttons, but you're also able to have maybe a little bit more scouting on your team against such threats, because, you know, they're Wish Passers. They're going to run Protect. And they also just have some decent overlap in terms of also checking some of the Pokemon that Escavalier would check. But if we're going to think about, like, another set that Escavalier's known for, I'd say it's this, like, 3 attacks with Protect set. Now, you can also see, I don't really know which move to take out. I'd probably say, like, when they reorganize these moves, just so they're in the order that I would say. So, this kind of set is generally really good with, like, Toxic Spikes from Jergalgy. You know, the EVs are overall kind of rudimentary, not rudimentary, the EVs are overall just kind of whatever. I think speed for Mudsdale is good. And then this is just, you know, we hit what you call a jump point. So look at this, 4. You see how it's going up by 1? But then this last 4 EVs jumps it up by 2. If anyone watching didn't know what a jump point was, that's all we mean. It's just, we're getting a little bit of attack. We're still running a lot of bulk. And then we have a speed benchmark. That's really all the EVs are trying to do. But this kind of set synergizes, like we said, really well with Jergalgy, still giving you also that ability to scout out certain special attackers that maybe have a coverage move for you. Even scouting out Copperajah for Heat Crash, that's still a pretty good thing to do. Superpower does like 40 to you, so you're not like a great Raja answer, but you do still check it. But if they have Heat Crash, it's over. Now, something you'll see occasionally, and I'd say this is where the speed investment is really helpful, is Sword Stance. Now, something to keep in mind with Escavalier is that Vileplume is actually probably this mon's best answer overall, because there's nothing Escavalier can consistently do to Plume to beat it down, right? This is the one set, or there's almost nothing. This is the one set that beats Vileplume all the time, because Overcoat prevents any like Sleep Powder shenanigans, and Sword Stance means that you will prevent Strength Sap Vileplume from stalling you out. And with the innovation of the Strength Sap Leech Seed Infestation set, right? You know, a lot of the time Escavalier might be tempted to stay in versus a Plume one turn. Maybe look for a knockoff just to see if they can get rid of Black Sludge, because, you know, Vileplume doesn't always go itemless. This is a way to just neutralize a lot of Escavaliers. So you run Sword Stance, and now Vileplume is not able to just stay in and 1v1 you. And this also gives you potential to beat down other bulky Pokemon a lot more consistently. Think about like Mudsdale, Vaporeon, for instance. So it gives you a lot of like, it gives you kind of the best of both worlds. Now, Close Combat, like we originally had, that is still good. It's your best move for opposing Escavalier. It's really just Steel-type coverage. Escavalier on the other team, Copperajah, Pharaoh Seed even, if you're running one of those. It's not a great move. It's not like overly useful, I wouldn't say. But, oh, Snorlax as well. Let's not forget him. If you're Sword Stance, you beat down Snorlax anyway with Mega Horn, but it's still a way to do like instant damage, which is potentially good. Same with Tyrantrum. You know, having a coverage move for rock types when you're foregoing your stab move that would otherwise hit them super effectively. Yeah, I would say that's pretty useful. And yeah, though, again, if we're talking like, we kind of have this almost set up as like a transition way, right? So here's like dedicated defensive, dedicated offensive, and like the best of both worlds, as I put it. But if we're talking about offensive Escavalier, right? I mean, we saw more of this, I should say, back when Bronzong was around, because I think Bronzong was just viewed as, you know, the best defensive steel by everyone. So if you're going offensive Escavalier, you're not getting that value that you otherwise would out of it being a steel type, at least on the defensive side. And so you'd have to stack steals, but that's how you would enable this sort of set. And you can still do that with Copperajah kinda, but it's a little bit harder. The Choice Band Escavalier is obviously going to be an incredible breaker. We saw a lot of it back in the, like, the official Smogon Snake Draft metagame back in 2020? Or 2019? It would have been 2020, yeah. Because 2019 was when this game, when Sword and Shield was released. So back in 2020, we saw a lot of this set. God, I can't even remember my years now. I'm doubting whether or not Sword Shield came out in 2018. Regardless, back when Smogon had its Snake Draft tournament, we saw this set because it was an incredibly strong wall breaker, and you still see some of it today. I think with how the metagame is, a lot of people opt for this, more something along these lines if they want offense out of Escav, just because you still end up oftentimes needing a lot of what it does defensively. But CB Escavalier, it does so much damage to everything that wants to pivot in on it. You know, your knockoff on a Talonflame as it tries to pivot in and fish for that burn with Flame Body, it's doing like, what, 60, 70%? And you're also removing their boots, which basically means you have a permanent 50 on the rest of the game. You're obviously annihilating Vileplume as they hard switch into you with Megahorn. And if they're really greedy and not running any speed, haha, yeah, max speed actually gives you the jump on Plume. And in general, you just want max speed because with this kind of wall breaker, all you're really trying to do is beat as many defensive Pokemon as you can. You know, with this, you want to dedicate all the way, in my eyes at least, to what you can do offensively. Maybe there's like a random bulk benchmark that you can still get, so you take a little bit out of speed. Because this is all you need for uninvested Plume. I don't know, say this gave you something. You know, you could do that. But I think the mirror matchup being as ideal as it can be, you know, at worst forcing speed ties, and then getting the jump on Pokemon like potentially Diancie if it's a really slow variant, Vileplume if it has no speed at all, Copperajah, this will give you the jump on that, same with like the Blade. There are a lot of Pokemon in that speed tier between no investment and all investment, to where I think it's just worth maxing out on that and trying to catch as many as you can. Now, something we actually saw last week in the NU Snake Draft was, and I don't know what the moves were, but we saw an Assault Vest Escavalier from Confide, I believe. I forget who he was facing. But it's kind of said, it's similar to Copperajah, where you just say, hey, look at my coverage, it's pretty good. And you know, if you have knockoff, this basically is the universal coverage move. And it's giving you, again, it's kind of like this idea here, where you're still getting a lot of bulk, you're just also getting a lot of power. And of course, you also don't have to lock into moves, which is good for other reasons. There are a lot of Pokemon in you that can potentially take advantage of an Escavalier locked into an unfavorable move. You know, say you're locked into Iron Head, well, maybe a Blastoise switches in on you with Shell Smashes and wins. Locked into Knockoff, maybe a Sylvally Ground sets up on you with Swords Dancing and wins. So this set kind of, it doesn't deny them setting up on you, but it makes it harder for them to just do it for free. And I'll be honest, I've never used this set, so I don't know about EVs. Maybe you don't need max speed. And I'm thinking about the other Assault Vest wall breaker in tier, of course, Copperajah. It's really flexible with its EVs. You can go slower, you can just go max speed. It's not really too important, but this, I just wanted to like get this out here. Yeah, this has been something people have tried at least a little bit lately. Now, if we're talking about like some counterplay, obviously this list is not exhaustive and some of the answers will be worse than others. I think Arcanine is obviously got to be included on that list. Arcanine's at least a little bit better now, with both Hail gone and Copperajah being much better in the tier now, and Escavalier still being really good. It's a little bit better off defensively now than it has been in previous metas. People also view Talonflame, there are some people that don't view Talonflame as S-rank anymore. I still think it's S-rank, but Talon no longer being like, okay, at least in my eyes, the definitive best option in the tier. Or at least one of two. Throw in Bronzong there. I guess I should do that, right? That opens up Arcanine to at least justify a slot on a couple more teams. I have defensive shown here. You could definitely run offensive Arcanine as well. I actually have, yeah, right here, Life Orb Arcanine. I actually have a little team with it here that I might ladder with. If you want to steal it, here you go. You just pause the video to get all the sets. But Arcanine in general just kind of does that. Yeah, look at these great team names. They're really powerful. Oh. Well. Here's ADV teams as well. Oh my lord, I'm losing track of where my Escavalier folder is. But obviously Arcanine in general is just really consistent at checking Escavalier. You resist the dual stabs, Intimidate helps neutralize more offensive variants. you're not getting broken through unless they run like Razor Shell, and that's not a good move. Yeah, you know, I feel like your other options are of giving you a little bit more of a, well, I'm not gonna talk myself into saying you could drop CC. Garbodor, this is more of an answer to like the specially defensive variants or the Protect 3 attack sets, because SDS Scav will Swords Dance up versus you and then beat you down, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. I guess you could like remove the item and then hope to Pain Split the Escavalier down slowly to where, with Aftermath taken into account, it's pretty much out of commission. But yeah, you can generally switch into it and just spike for free. Mantine Sword is similar, where you don't want to lose boots, of course. Obviously, Arcanine applies there as well. But you switch into it, and you at least threaten a burn with Scald. You're always faster than it. There's some potential there. Mudsdale as well. As we said earlier, it does suck that you're not hitting it with a super effective Earthquake, but you're still a very bulky horse, and so that can help in the long term. You can even do like Body Press here. We've seen a little bit more of that recently. And Body Press, you know, if Escavalier stays in and keeps trying to hit you, it at least starts becoming stronger than Earthquake. Salazzle, of course, I mean, look, it's a fire type. That's really all there is to it. It is a fire type. You are going to hit it up, and you're going to OHKO it. You resist the dual stabs. That's really all there is to it. Knockoff from offensive variants obliterates you. Like, this isn't a switch in, but if you're able to keep up momentum on Escavalier, which is pretty easy to do, Escavalier does switch into a fair few pivots in the tier consistently. You know, think about like Serena, for instance. It's coming in on, maybe it comes in on a Heliolisk, just because the special bulk is so great. So you can at least find turns to come in for free and then threaten that OHKO. Talonflame really hates knockoff, but realistically Escavalier isn't breaking you too easily. Physically defensive Vaporeon, I think, deserves more usage right now with how good Sylvally Ground is, and also just giving you more room against other physical attackers like Aerodactyl and Mudsdale. It's like Mantine, except doesn't care about getting knocked nearly as much, and similarly is going to threaten that bird with Scald. Vileplume, as we said earlier, it's going to be the most consistent Escavalier answer unless you run into Swords Dance, but you otherwise are going to be pretty good at beating down a Scav. I guess you could also worry about like CB if you're not running speed, which I actually always do. So I'm gonna edit this spread here to be faster. I guess you only need to hit this, but I'm gonna have it 20 to get a jump on the other. Look at that, very talented. But as we said, Escavalier, unless it's Swords Dance, it's not going to beat down Vileplume ever. Weezing might just be the best check ever, the more I think about it. Especially since you could try to run Flamethrower somewhere. In general, there's a lot of flexibility here with Weezing's move slots. You could be, I don't know where I'd fit Flamethrower. You could be like Pain Split, though, with, Toxic Spikes here. And then, like, a Rocky Helmet. This helps potentially weaken a Escavalier, especially if they're not knocking you as you switch in. And in Pain Split just helps keep it low. You burn it so it can never boost. A lot of good to be had here. And then the last one we have is just standard Xatu. Obviously, Xatu's not very bulky. So if it's an offensive Escavalier, knockoff is going to fold you like a table. You're getting, you know, folded up and put in the closet for storage. But I would still say Xatu is one of the better answers to Escavalier. You could deny specially defensive sets rather consistently, and of course Heat Wave is just going to pressure it really hard. It's a good way of making sure that you don't allow too much of that progress making to happen. And although Heat Wave won't OHKO, it's like, I don't need it to OHKO, I just need to threaten the Escavalier with a heavy amount of chip. It's like how you got Gleam on Xatu sometimes to catch a Guzzlord, right? It's not that you're trying to OHKO it, you're just trying to improve your odds at beating it, and also dissuade it from taking those trades later. Although, yeah, you could Gleam a Guzz as it comes in. You could do that. Anyhow, that's Escavalier. I think it's pretty impressive. Mudsdale's another Pokemon that I do want to cover eventually. in terms of just this generation Pokemon that has been in you for quite a while and is just through multiple metas, through multiple huge shifts, you know, talk about like DLC release, has just managed to stay at the top of the tier, which is really impressive, especially when you think about it as like, there's kind of two ends of the spectrum here. Escavalier, never really viewed as an NU Pokemon. Maybe last gen in RU it wasn't good or very good, but you know, never thought that it dropped to NU. And then like Mudsdale this gen, when you look at it last gen, never thought it'd be an NU Pokemon because it was always like below. And all it really got this gen was Smackdown and Body Press, and now, well, look at it, it's borderline S rank. I hope y'all enjoyed this though. Of course, if you did, leave a like. Subscribe if you're still watching and you haven't subbed already. Because if you're at this point, right, you must like the video. Or you must like the content I'm putting out enough. Don't see why you wouldn't just press the button. And hey, if you are subscribed, hit that bell. I don't know if it actually matters, but you may as well hit the bell anyway. Always get notified when we upload. Might even notify you if I ever stream, which I've been known to do every couple of months. I hope y'all enjoy your day, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.